discover the incredible journey of a cleaner, how one dance changed everything for a millionaire. Carlos could feel the tension in the air as he meticulously dusted off the oak frames in the grand foyer of one of New York City's most prestigious law firms. The brass chandeliers glimmered above, illuminating the flurry of well-dressed lawyers mingling, laughing, and boasting of closed deals and upcoming cases. For Carlos, each swipe of the cloth was a step against the tide of financial instability that loomed over him like storm clouds. He thought of his father, who worked tirelessly as a factory laborer, and the dedication instilled in him to never let his family down. Yet, that very devotion felt crushing sometimes. He often questioned if his hard work as a cleaner was enough, or if he'd be forever trapped in the shadows of the polished suits around him. At that moment, the strains of classical music filled the space, and Carlos turned, mesmerized by a group of dancers flowing effortlessly across the marble floor. Their body movements told stories, showcasing a world rich with artistry, something he had silenced in himself, desperate to make ends meet. His mother had always encouraged him to find joy in expression, to dance when he could. But how could he, in the midst of financial strain? The performers glided seamlessly, and with each twist and turn, Carlos felt a spark ignite within him, a reminder of a passion he thought he buried long ago. As the night continued, the energy pulsed, and before he knew it, Jessica, the senior partner, sharp and discerning, stood beside him, taking in his rapt attention. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if assessing him through a different lens. "You've got fire, don't you?" she remarked. Carlos hesitated, unsure how to respond. His heart raced with opportunity yet pounded with fear. Then, her words tumbled down like a cascade of light. "There's a private dance showcase after the gala, you should come." That invitation rattled through him, stirring up latent hope and brewing waves of anxiety. His co-workers had always viewed dreams as distractions from reality, scoffing whenever someone dared to speak of ambition. Carlos grappled with thoughts of loyalty toward them, knowing they depended on steady work from him. Yet, could he risk everything, his job, his current life, for a shot at something that could feel permanent, fulfilling? As he cleaned, it became harder to dismiss his longing for freedom. Uneasiness settled like lead in his stomach, tethered between ambition and responsibility. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." As whispers of discontent began to ripple through the firm regarding a scandal threatening their underbelly, Carlos stood in front of the mirror in his cramped apartment, rehearsing the dance routine he had practiced all week, his body stiff and hesitant. The stakes climbed higher with each passing day. Should he remain a silent observer, ensuring his family's safety, or embrace this opportunity? The thought gnawed at him. The truth they were all burying beneath suits and cash flows was the very corruption that could shatter everything he had fought to build. Gripping the edge of the countertop, he stared deeply into his own reflection. Did he even have the courage to stand up? Just one performance could flip the script on everything, could reveal more than just his talent but the injustices layered within the firm. As the performance loomed closer, dread mounted, pressing against his chest like a vice, leaving him restless and raw. Tonight, on that stage, the spotlight would shine brightly, blinding him to the safety of the shadows he had known for too long. He pressed a hand to his heart. Could he take that first step toward redemption, or would fear keep him tethered to his life of uncertainty? The day of the showcase arrived, heavy with anticipation and a bated breath that filled every corner of Carlos's cramped apartment. Sunlight filtered through the window, casting shadows as flickering and uncertain as his resolve. His heart raced, fueled by a mix of excitement and the nagging voice of doubt. Carlos found himself repeatedly adjusting his shirt, the crisp fabric feeling alien against his skin, like a costume for a play he wasn't sure he belonged in. "Am I ready for this?" he whispered to the empty room, glancing once more at his reflection. The sight of his own uncertainty mirrored back at him made him both feel stronger and more fragile. But just beneath the surface of his self-doubt lay a budding determination he couldn't ignore. This was his opportunity to redefine his destiny. He clenched his fists, reminding himself of the rhythm he had felt during the rehearsals, the fire ignited by every practiced pirouette and dramatic leap. He just had to summon that feeling one more time. Arriving at the venue, a luxurious rooftop bar perched above the city, Carlos took a moment to breathe in the ambience. The skyline shimmered against the sunset, a lavish backdrop to a gathering that felt worlds away from his daily life as a cleaner. Dancers mingled in elegant attire, laughter echoing around him, a reminder of how little he fit into this opulent scene. Yet, deep down, it was this very world he yearned to step into, the world of expression, freedom, and artistry. Jessica approached him, her authoritative presence cutting through the noise. "You ready?" she asked, trading formality for encouragement. "Just remember, this is your moment. Let the audience see the real you." Her words struck a chord, but Carlos could only muster a shaky smile in response. The pressure weighed heavily on him, both the eyes of the crowd and the reality of his current life suffocating him. He was not just dancing, he was risking everything he had worked for. As he stepped onto the stage, the spotlight cut through the dusk, illuminating him against the vibrant backdrop of a fading city. Silence fell, an anticipatory hush that heightened his pulse. They were all waiting, eager for something raw and unfiltered. The music began, and Carlos closed his eyes briefly, becoming aware of the rhythm resonating in his chest. He took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes, he moved, each step releasing the heaviness he had carried for so long. With every leap and turn, Carlos found himself. The movement spoke of his struggles, his longings, and the burdens of responsibility that had often clouded his vision. He danced not just for himself but for every sacrifice made by his family, each burden shifted from his shoulders. The weight of his fears began to dissolve, dissipating into the air like the notes of the music that hovered around him. The audience responded, captivated, and he saw their faces light up with intrigue, with the connection that only art could forge. But alongside that thrill, a pang of recognition hit him. This performance was also a reckoning. He could no longer avoid the truths that lurked just beneath the surface of his life: the corruption at the firm, the silent complicity of his colleagues. They all seemed to watch, specters in tailored suits, as he unveiled not only his talent but the potential for exposure of what lay behind their polished lives. As the final notes rang out, he stood, breathless and vulnerable, caught in a moment suspended between triumph and turmoil. The applause filled the air, a roaring tide that both buoyed him and threatened to drown out the urgency of his revelations. In that space of exhilaration and anxiety, Carlos realized he was at a crossroads. One dance had not only awakened his identity but unveiled a pressing choice that could alter everything. While the cheers echoed around him, a thought nagged at the back of his mind. He might be stepping into the limelight, but could he also step into the storm that awaited him in the firm? The moment of truth was approaching. A choice loomed large ahead. Whispering its dangerous promise, to confront the darkness shadowing the firm or retreat back into the shadows he had only just begun to escape. As the applause faded to a murmur, Carlos stood frozen, his heart thundering in his chest, not entirely sure if he wanted to bask in the aftermath of his performance or flee the weight of his next decision. Behind the vibrant facade of applause and admiration, an unsettling truth loomed larger. The corporate world he had dedicated himself to was riddled with corruption, and now those very suits would undoubtedly test his courage. With each passing moment, the thrill from the stage began to dissipate, replaced by a tremor of anxiety coursing through him. Recognizing the faces in the audience as colleagues and rivals illuminated the stark reality of his dual existence, one of a dancer, vibrant and uncontained, and another as a silent observer in a world he no longer fully trusted. He could see Jessica in the corner, her expression a mixture of pride and expectation, yet Carlos felt distant, as if he was looking at a far-off life. He slipped away from the crowd, his heart still racing, seeking an escape from the festive atmosphere. Moments before stepping out onto the balcony, he caught sight of his reflection in the glass, a determined young man resolved to redefine himself while wrestling with the ghosts of his past. Could he really go back to his role at the firm after claiming a space in the world of artistry? Was it possible to make a statement in an environment that repressed creativity and individuality? The vibrant city lights pulsed beneath him, a constant reminder of the possibility that lay ahead. Carlos's mind drifted back to the notes of the music, the freedom he felt dancing across that stage. It ignited something primal and raw within him, urging him to embrace this clarity. The performance was not just a fleeting moment of triumph. It wasn't merely a showcase of talent. It was a clarion call to decide what mattered more, the facade of job security or the authenticity of his growing identity. The wind ruffled his shirt, startling him from his thoughts. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present, parsing through possibilities and consequences. He had witnessed his colleagues burying their truths, turning a blind eye to the systemic issues nested within complicity that threatened to entrap them indefinitely. The weight of their choices hung heavily in the air. What would happen if he exposed the unsettling realities? What repercussions might follow? Before he could solidify an answer, his phone buzzed with Jessica's name flashing across the screen. The glow illuminated his conflicted face, a mixture of excitement and dread. He answered. "Carlos, that was incredible." Her voice rang like bells, vibrant with enthusiasm. "I'll have the recordings for you. Your talent deserves to be shared. Will you consider joining our next project? This is your chance to step fully into this world." Hearing her excitement acted as a catalyst, finally sharpening his resolve. Here was an opportunity to diverge from a path that had stifled him. But would he be abandoning his responsibilities? His family had sacrificed so much. Could they afford for him to chase a dream deemed unrealistic? "Jessica, I need time to think," he replied, fighting against the rush of choices swirling in his mind. "I understand, but remember, opportunities like this don't wait forever," she encouraged gently, sensing the tumult in his hesitation. As the call ended, Carlos leaned against the railing, consumed by a surge of conflicting emotions. He envisioned himself plunging into the depths of the corporate abyss or stepping into a spotlight that promised authenticity and growth. The stakes were immense, but so was the urgency of change. As the skyline twinkled in the darkness, he closed his eyes, and the sounds of the city embraced him. The choice before him was pulsating with potential, each path lined with its own threats and joys. He felt the call of the storm yet to come, the confrontation waiting for him within the office corridors, the darkness he had to address if he chose to remain. Would he stand his ground against the forces shaping his life? Or would he summon the courage to forge a new path entirely? The moment of truth was here, and with each passing second, Carlos could feel the pulse of destiny pushing him toward a reckoning he could no longer ignore. He opened his eyes, decision forming on the horizon, and took a deep breath. The next steps would define everything. But could he muster the strength to confront the dark realities of his firm, knowing that every moment spent in silence may strip away the vibrant life he had just begun to embrace? Carlos stood on the balcony, the cool night air threading through his hair and heightening his senses. He could still feel the echo of the music coursing through him, a reminder that he was not just a cog in the corporate machine but a creator, an artist. Yet the darkness within the office haunted him, a specter of complicity and corruption that stirred unease. He took a deep breath and envisioned the conversation he needed to have, the confrontation that had been simmering within him like a storm brewing on the horizon. What would he say to the executives who had swept unethical practices under the rug? They had embraced mediocrity over integrity, and the thought of returning to that world felt suffocating. His mind raced through the consequences of his potential choices. Rejecting the corporate structures meant stepping into uncertainty, but the allure of living authentically tugged at his heart. Could he use the influence he still wielded within the firm to instigate change? Or would he be sacrificing too much for a battle that might prove futile? Determined yet conflicted, he paced the balcony, his thoughts swirling like leaves caught in the wind. Each step urged him to weigh his options against the ideals he had harbored since childhood. Carlos had always dreamed of a life where creativity wasn't stifled, where the lines blurred between art and daily existence. Was it selfish to pursue that now, knowing the sacrifices his family had made? As if to punctuate his inner turmoil, the phone buzzed again with a message from Jessica. "Remember, change requires courage. Just think about it." Her words resonated. They were not only about the project, they reflected the broader, unspoken challenge facing him. Could he summon the strength to confront the corporate practices he had long overlooked? Was it too late to stand tall in a world that often favored silence? The view of the city, glimmering below, signified everything for which he had yearned: freedom, creativity, and authenticity. Carlos felt a shift within himself, a resolve formulating. Maybe he didn't need to make a final choice tonight, but he could prepare. So, he gestured for his phone, eyes narrowing as he opened his email. Drafting a letter to his colleagues felt both daunting and liberating. He laid out his thoughts on integrity, urging them to reflect on their moral compass. Perhaps it would open a dialogue, sparking something meaningful or igniting discomfort. It didn't matter. What mattered was he was taking a stand. As he typed, a revelation ignited. He held power in his voice. Each word was a step toward transformation, weaving a bridge from his past toward a future he could embrace. The reality of the situation hit him. He wouldn't just be risking his job but could potentially inspire others to question and reflect. The phone dinged again. It was Jessica checking in. Almost done? Carlos paused, unsure if his decision to draft the email would lead to ruin or revolution. Perhaps tonight was not just about the firing of choices, but the forging of a new identity. In the test of his resolve, he recognized the moment was ripe not just for an artistic rebirth but for moral alignment with his true self. He took a deep breath and pressed send, the weight of the message hanging in the air like a final note leaving the stage. As soon as the email flashed green, he felt a rush of exhilaration but also a twinge of fear. The time had come to face the storm brewing in the corporate halls, a confrontation not simply with the system, but with himself. Would he be ready to walk through the throngs of his colleagues, prepared for the backlash lurking behind their crisp suits? Far from the stage's localized brightness, a larger battle awaited in the depths of the corporate labyrinth. Carlos closed his eyes, envisioning that looming threshold he would have to cross again, marking not only a return to the role he had loathed but also the potential of rewriting the rules with resolute authenticity. As dawn broke over the city, Carlos awoke with a heart still racing from his midnight decision. The world outside was waking too, yet he felt caught in a liminal space between the unfulfilled corporate facade he had long inhabited and the vibrant authenticity he yearned for. Staring at the ceiling, he could almost hear the echoes of his past colliding with his aspirations. The email he sent still lingered in his mind, a catalyst in a journey he could barely comprehend. His phone was buzzing again. It was Jessica, her message almost breaching the barrier of morning calm. "You did it. How are you feeling?" Carlos hesitated before responding. "It feels unreal," he typed, grappling with the weight of his own words. The self-doubt started to creep in once more. What if no one took his message seriously? What if he had just put himself in a precarious position, risking his career without a safety net? Nevertheless, he couldn't ignore the deeper urge building in him. He reminded himself of the times he had felt trapped, watching opportunities slip through his fingers like grains of sand. The creative ideas he envisioned were stifled under the heavy weight of conformity. With each thought, fury and frustration surged, propelling him forward. If courage was the key to change, he had turned the lock. Now was the time for action. Carlos dusted himself off and got dressed, choosing a navy blue blazer, something to encapsulate the professional he was expected to be, yet with a hint of his own style. He wanted to present the best version of himself in a place that had for too long smothered creativity. Walking into the office felt like stepping into an alternate reality, the familiar scents and stuffy silence wrapping around him like a cloak. Tension invaded his previously quiet confidence as he made his way to his desk. Colleagues raised eyebrows and shared whispers, their curiosity a palpable current in the office air. He felt exposed, but that was the beauty of his specific rebellion. Instead of hiding, he embraced the looks of disdain and confusion. He had ignited something not merely with his email but with a promise to himself to uphold a new code of ethics and authenticity. Fueled by an unshakable resolve, Carlos opened his laptop and began researching ways to present his vision for change. He knew he needed allies, people who shared his quest for innovation over stagnation. The corporate structure thrived on comfort, yet somewhere beneath the surface, he sensed a stir of collective discontent among his colleagues waiting for the right call to action. Later that day, during a break in the conference room, Carlos approached a few trusted colleagues, Alice, a creative strategist, and Malcolm, the project lead. Both had long mulled over the lack of originality in their campaigns, stifled by the insistence on returning to antiquated methods. "Alice, Malcolm, can we talk for a minute?" he said, voice hesitant yet firm. They nodded, the glimmer of interest in their eyes solidifying his resolve. "I sent an email yesterday addressing our ethical practices and the need for change," Carlos began, gauging their reactions. "There's an opportunity here for us to rethink how we do things, to inject more creativity into our projects." A flicker of surprise passed across Malcolm's face. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," Carlos asserted, the weight of his conviction buoying him. "We've all felt at endless meetings that yield nothing, ideas brushed aside because they challenge the norm. What if we could start a new dialogue?" Alice leaned in, intrigued. "But how can we bridge that gap? The risk is immense." Carlos took a breath, aware that the road ahead would be fraught with difficult choices and uncertainties. "Together, we can gather our voices and present a proposal to the executives, show them that change is not just possible but necessary for the future." As he spoke, a sense of momentum began building within him, pulsing with possibility. They discussed strategies, hopeful threads woven into a fabric of defiance and innovation. With each word, Carlos was shedding his old skin, transforming into the leader he deep inside always wanted to be. The conversation grew animated, plans unfolding as they delved into ideas that had long been silenced. The energy in the room elevated the stakes together. They could build a coalition that demanded acknowledgement, that would reshape their corporate landscape. As the meeting wrapped up, Carlos felt a cocktail of exhilaration and fear rush through him. The initiative was gaining traction, but now he would need to rally support from others, lay the groundwork for a movement that could shake their complacency to its core. With a newfound determination striking his core, he stepped out of the conference room, ready to embrace the storm of reactions that awaited him. And as he left, one burning question loomed in his mind: would the executives listen, or would his vision of change be met with resistance strong enough to cripple their budding movement? Feeling the weight of expectation pressing against his shoulders, Carlos made his way through the office, each step echoing his resolve. Conversations buzzed around him, an undercurrent of uncertainty mixed with curiosity. He could feel eyes following him, and rather than retreating into his shell, he met their gazes with a newfound confidence. As the hours passed, he busied himself gathering materials for his presentation. The conference room became his sanctuary, where ideas flooded from his mind onto paper. Installing whiteboards and arranging sticky notes, he drew connections between concepts that felt revolutionary against the backdrop of the company's status quo. He omitted titles and bullet points, crafting a visual representation of a future he could almost touch, one filled with collaboration, creativity, and respect for individuals' contributions. Yet, with each stroke of his marker, anxiety lingered just beneath the surface. What if this endeavor failed? What if he lost everything he had worked for? Despite the insecurities smothering him, one undeniable truth surged within Carlos: the fear of stagnation was far more terrifying than any consequence of taking a stand. He envisioned the executives in their austere suits, faces often set as stone, evaluating his proposal. Would they comprehend the gravity of what he was advocating? His mind drifted to a particularly harsh meeting they had conducted last month, where creativity had flickered but was snuffed out before it could ignite. The memory churned something deep inside him, igniting a fire that could no longer be ignored. Bolstering himself with determination, he reached out to a few additional colleagues who had expressed frustration with the lack of creativity in their recent projects: Sarah from marketing and Jonathan from development. He scheduled informal meetups where they unpacked their ideas and envisioned a culture shift together. Slowly, it became a tapestry woven from their collective experiences, each of them adding textures of challenge and innovation. They shared stories of frustrations faced, disheartened beliefs about their roles, and dreams that had laid dormant. This group formed an unbreakable foundation, challenging Carlos to push beyond merely presenting a proposal. He needed to incite thought, engage emotion, and provoke deep reflection. As the days passed, Carlos grew restless. Deadlines loomed closer. Each conversation felt like a stepping stone to potential conflict with the executive board. By the time the presentation day arrived, the adrenaline coursing through his veins was palpable, a nervous energy accompanying his every movement. Dressed in his navy blue blazer, he walked into the conference room that had so often felt as oppressive as it was familiar. But this time, the room felt different. It pulsed with the energy of change. He exchanged furtive glances with his team, their expressions intertwining apprehension and anticipation. Carlos paced before the group of stern-looking executives. All the rehearsals, all the late-night brainstorming sessions led to this moment. Today, we stand at a crossroads, he began, voice steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. The room fell silent, and he could feel the weight of their collective scrutiny. We can choose to continue on our current path, or we can embrace a new culture of creativity. As he spoke, he noticed the executive's body language shift. Some leaned forward, intrigued. Others crossed their arms, skeptical. He lunged into the data he had meticulously compiled, using real-world examples, tapping into emotional narratives to engage their empathy. He revealed how meaningful innovation could elevate the company not only financially but also as a leader in their industry. Yet, just as he reached the crescendo of his argument, a voice cut through the tension. Marie, the CEO, cocked an eyebrow. Innovative sounds great, Carlos, but what about profitability? We can't simply embrace change for the sake of change. That single statement hung thick in the air, igniting a flurry of thoughts in Carlos's mind, and as he opened his mouth to respond, a breath caught in his throat. This could easily turn against him or propel the movement forward. His answer could dictate their future, not just for him but for everyone at the company. Would he rally for what he believed, or would fear lead him to concede? The moment stretched like a taut wire, and Carlos understood this was not merely about a proposal, it was his chance to redefine who he was in the face of adversity. The pivotal decision lay before him, one that would determine not only his fate but the heartbeat of creativity within the walls of his corporate prison. And as he swallowed hard, the tension in his chest morphed into clarity. If the moment was now, he needed to seize it. And with that revelation pulsing through him, he prepared to respond. Would he rise to the challenge, or retreat into the shadows of doubt once more? He inhaled deeply, readying his voice to break the silence. Marie, profitability is essential, of course, but innovation does not negate our financial goals, it enhances them. History shows that companies that invest in creativity thrive even amidst economic downturns. Look at the market leaders. Their success hinges not merely on existing models but on visionary ideas that redefine boundaries. As the words spilled from him, a buoyancy grew, lifting his earlier trepidation into something vibrant and alive. He glanced around the room, his colleagues watching with a flicker of hope mingled with their nerves. He could almost palpate the collective heartbeat of his team echoing behind him. But the executives remained largely unmoved, their expressions inscrutable, reserved behind walls of skepticism. Carlos pressed on, citing specific examples of industry transformations. He spoke of untold scenarios where companies had incurred initial losses in pursuit of innovative avenues, only to emerge stronger, smarter, and ultimately more profitable. Each argument meticulously crafted not just to defend his proposal but to create a spark in the hearts of his audience, inviting them to envision a shared future. Yet, it was Marie's narrowed gaze that intensified his resolve. The room was charged, the silence heavy with decision. Instead of faltering, he chose vulnerability as his ally. I understand the risk involved, he admitted, but every evolution requires a leap of faith. I stand here because I believe our team is capable of greatness. However, greatness can't be accomplished while clinging to the past. He took a moment to assess the shifting dynamics. A few executives, enticed, exchanged whispered conversations. The tide was turning, but Carlos could feel the tide was still uncertain, like precarious waters cradling both hope and fear. The CEO interjected again, folding her arms, a clear challenge behind her composure. So you believe changing the company culture alone will spur profitability? Convince us this is not just an idealistic dream. An involuntary spark of anger flashed inside Carlos. He sensed the underlying critique. Was she questioning his seriousness or his ability? Fueled by the fiery embers of passion, he countered, it's about more than culture, it's an ecosystem of skills, trust, and collaborative intelligence. You want results? Let us redefine how we work together, cultivate our creative potential. I want to build bridges, not walls. In that moment, he recognized a shift in his own mindset. Gone was the desperate plea of an insecure employee. In its place stood a leader, willing to embrace discomfort for the sake of progress. Carlos exuded determination that made Marie raise her eyebrows slightly, a sign of intrigue beneath her cautious demeanor. "Show us how," she commanded, her tone softening ever so slightly, but it still demanded an answer. He nodded, stealing glances at his colleagues who silently urged him on. Clarity whispered through him he would not merely speak about creativity, he would embody it. "Let us create a task force dedicated to innovation," he proposed, adrenaline surging through his veins. "A team whose sole purpose is not to serve as another layer of bureaucracy, but as advocates for creativity within every project. Let us apply real feedback from our teams to inform our strategies and launch carefully curated pilot programs." A ripple of tension coursed through the room. Yet, the vulnerability brimming in his proposal knocked at doors he hoped the executives had long believed sealed. Carlos could sense potential blossoming around him, tangible and electrifying. Marie leaned back slightly, regarding him with newfound respect, a wisdom buried beneath her critical exteriors. "Carlos," she began, and he held his breath. He braced for impending judgment or perhaps something more. But then, the conference room door swung open with an abruptness that shattered the fragile atmosphere, cutting through the moment one of the executives had burst in with urgency. "We need to pivot today's strategy. There's been a market shift." Suddenly, all focus shifted from Carlos, and he felt the weight of possibility slip from his grasp, leaving behind a void of uncertainty. Where would that leave his proposal? Was he to be sidelined once more, or was this an unexpected opening to collaborate in a way that he had always aspired to? As the executives turned their attention towards the new crisis, Carlos faced an urgent truth. He now stood at the brink of a new venture but needed to grab hold of this moment or risk losing it altogether. Would he step up, amidst the chaos, seizing this unforeseen opportunity to further his vision of change? His mind raced. How could he transform this setback into an ally for his cause? The challenge before him now was not just about imagination, it was about adaptability in the face of the world's unpredictability. The real battleground awaited, and Carlos felt a pull towards the unknown that excited him more than any fear could stifle. He just had to find the courage to step into it, and uncertainty danced in front of him, inviting but treacherous. As he contemplated the unfolding situation, an unexpected realization struck him from within. Maybe the market shift presented a chance to prove his aspirations. Could he turn their misfortune into an opportunity for creativity to flourish, once and for all? The stage was set for the next act of his journey, and he was ready to confront whatever actions awaited him. The conference room buzzed with a palpable tension as the executives exchanged nervous glances. Carlos felt the world tilt beneath him. The moment he had desperately sought was now faced with a crisis that threatened to overwhelm him. His hands fidgeted subtly at his sides, each flicker of doubt reminding him of a fundamental choice. Was he going to retreat into the shadows of uncertainty, or step boldly into the uncertain light? His heart raced, and time felt elastic, moments stretching endlessly as he processed the implications of the market shift. What if this upheaval was the launching pad he needed? The very chaos that threatened the status quo could be the catalyst for the innovative culture he yearned to establish. Let us harness this, he thought, vision sharpening. What if we pivot not only in response to the market but actively design our strategy to create new pathways? This could become our moment of rebirth. He glanced back at Marie, her imposing presence now more relatable, the weight of her skepticism morphing slowly into curiosity. "Excuse me," Carlos interjected, interrupting the waves of chaotic discussions forming around him. "I think I have an idea on how to navigate this shift creatively. If we reinterpret this market change not as a disruption but as an opportunity, we could engage our team's insights right now. Allow them to explore this challenge, innovate in real time, and amplify our response." The urgency in the room shifted, a cautious attention turning towards him. Carlos continued, "I propose we assemble a cross-functional task force, not only from our traditional sectors but bringing in fresh voices from across the company. Together, this team can lay down real-time strategies and solutions directly in response to consumer needs as they evolve." His words carried a momentum, and with each passing moment, he felt the assembly starting to resonate with his vision. This isn't about ad hoc fixes, it's about establishing a continuous feed of creativity that responds to the market in real time, enriching our product lines, and redefining our consumer engagement. The CEO seemed interested, no longer a wall of indifference. Carlos forged ahead. By allowing teams the autonomy to execute miniature pilots, we can test these responses swiftly. Let us use the impending changes to experiment, to innovate in ways we haven't even considered yet. Questions swirled around the room, uncertainty mingling with intrigue. He could see Marie processing, perhaps for the first time genuinely contemplating the realm of possibilities. But even with this apparent slight shift, he felt the pressure of potential fallout. What if the teams faltered? What if this opened floodgates to further chaos? Yet as he stood there, the potential weight of failure began to pale in comparison to the liberating prospect of change, of becoming a true leader, one who doesn't shy away from adversity but embraces it as fertile ground for growth. We must act quickly, Carlos urged, his voice steadying. Let us not wait for the crash before we adapt. Let us lead with imagination and intention. I am ready to rally the troops. Will you stand beside me? As he finished, silence enveloped the room once again. The gravity of his words hung in the air, poised between hope and apprehension. Would his colleagues rally, driven by this newfound spark of creativity? Or would they retreat to the familiarity of old habits, hesitant to embrace the unknown? Carlos stood motionless, a subtle adrenaline coursing through him. This defining moment was not merely about seizing opportunities, it was a crucible for personal evolution. He sensed he was on the cusp of breaking free from his previous constraints, a transformation that could define his career. But just as the tension reached its peak, the conference room door opened again. This time, it was another executive, adrenaline-laced urgency plastered across their face. We need immediate decisions on direction. The market's unforgiving, and we have competitors already on the move. Carlos's heart plummeted. Here lay a new challenge, a direct confrontation with the nuances of leadership. How would he react? Would he wield the tools of innovation he'd just proposed, or would the tide of panic pull him under? His mind raced, realizing the stakes. Would he adhere to the principles he had just advocated for, or yield to fear? As darkness loomed with uncertainty, Carlos steeled himself for the impending test of his newfound convictions. The rapid unfolding of these events demanded clarity soon, and his leadership would be intricately woven into the fabric of this decision now. As murmurs of negotiation filled the air, he gathered his thoughts, prepared to redefine his own role amid the mercurial tides of business. The moment of truth was nearing, but he was determined to forge ahead, willing to meet the chaos head-on. Whatever direction lay ahead, this journey was just beginning, and Carlos felt ready to turn possibilities into reality. In the aftermath of the crisis declaration, the air in the conference room thickened with urgency. Carlos's pulse quickened, each beat drowning out the murmurs of his colleagues as he fought to harness his rising anxiety. The executive had posed a question, a clarion call for immediate action, and now the spotlight rested uncomfortably on his shoulders. Would he crumble under the pressure or fortify his conviction? As his thoughts coalesced, Carlos leaned forward, a tremor of determination igniting within him. Let us not forget what we're capable of, he asserted, his voice cutting sharply through the din of uncertainty. We have the talent and the creativity to not only meet these challenges but to redefine our trajectory. He watched as his words landed, gauging the reactions of the executives. Their eyes flitted between skepticism and newfound focus. Was that a glimmer of approval from Marie? Or was he simply projecting his desires? The indecisive nature of hope felt fragile yet exhilarating. Let us set up a rapid response unit, he proposed, attempting to blend strategy with urgency. We can task a small group to analyze our competitors' moves and pivot accordingly. The market is changing, but we can analyze and respond creatively instead of defensively. Silence enveloped the room again, and in that moment, Carlos faced the very essence of personal risk. He felt exposed, standing at the edge of a precipice, aware that this bold suggestion could either catapult him to leadership transformation or thrust him into professional obscurity. You seem confident, interjected Marie, her eyes narrowing with challenge. But what if this unit fails? What if we invest resources and it falls flat? In every risk is the opportunity to innovate, Carlos replied, his internal thoughts spiraling. He had to believe in this vision. He had to project resilience. Failure is part of the process. The only way to evolve is to allow for it. Under pressure, creativity emerges. Failure could expose us to new pathways. Yet as he made his case, the gravity of her skepticism tightened its grip on him. Reeling from the mere idea of public defeat, Carlos battled a storm of self-doubt. Could he merge his personal stakes with the ambitions of the team? The thought of navigating uncharted waters daunted him, brushing against an uncomfortable truth: his leadership style had always existed within the safety of predictability. Clearly, that was about to change. Let us test this, he urged once more, channeling a fiery resolve. I'm ready to lead the task force, to be the first to pilot this venture. If we believe in the people we've hired, we should give them the platform to innovate. As he spoke, the tone of the room seemed to shift, first subtle, then profound. Executives who had once cast doubtful glances now leaned in. There was movement among them, hesitation warring with interest. Carlos felt emboldened, yet shadows of uncertainty still loomed heavy in his mind. Just then, the door swung open a crack. The same executive who had previously interrupted them poked his head through once more. We need someone to put together a draft plan by end of day. The board expects solutions. In that instant, the weight of expectation burdened Carlos further. How could he balance their urgent demand with the creative freedom he wished to allow? Could he influence his team to embrace risk in an environment that thrived on control? He could feel the pressure intensifying around him, and it tethered him to a critical crossroads. As the executive's presence lingered, Carlos contemplated the implications of his ideas. They were imbued with potential, but could they survive the harsh glare of scrutiny? He found himself questioning his ability to execute not just strategies, but to cultivate trust both in himself and his colleagues. But before he could explore this disquieting reality further, he locked eyes with Marie. There was an unspoken agreement in her gaze, a faint flicker of respect tempered by her natural skepticism. Uncertainty still hung thick, but for the first time, Carlos felt a whisper of solidarity budding beneath the surface. With decisions lingering heavily in the air, Carlos steeled his resolve. He would have to navigate these turbulent waters, blending innovation with responsibility. He could not allow fear to anchor him to inaction. The true challenge lay ahead, and the choice was his to embrace. Engaging with these complexities could either ground him in newfound competency or leave him adrift without clarity. But as he prepared to respond to the mounting pressure, he sensed an internal pivot, recognition that he must not merely react but actively shape this chaos into a rallying point for his career. Let us come together, formulate our risks, and pave our own way forward, he declared, his heart pounding with a fierce resolve. As those words hung palpably in the air, Carlos questioned his readiness for what was to come, a blend of daunting challenges and untapped potential. The room, rich with tension, seemed to hold its breath as he awaited feedback, but his gaze remained focused, hungry for the shift he was daring to claim. This moment demanded clarity. The urgency could either solidify his legacy or reveal the fragility of his ambition. Would he prevail, or would he falter in the face of defining resistance? The immediate future lingered uncertainly before him as the stage was set for transformative decisions that could lead him to redefine his essence as a leader. The morning sun streamed into the conference room as Carlos took his spot at the head of the table, a place he had only dreamed of occupying. The air buzzed with nervous excitement, a palpable energy thrummed underneath the surface. Today was not merely a presentation of ideas but a culmination of months of struggle and growth. The chaos of past weeks had solidified into focus, sharpening his resolve like a blade. With each colleague seated around the table trusting faces that once doubted him, he felt a shift in the atmosphere, one that paired vulnerability with power. They had gathered not just to present a strategy but to challenge norms and advocate for transformation. Thank you all for coming, Carlos began, his voice steady, each word forged with purpose. We are on the brink of a major market shift, an opportunity to redefine how we engage with our clients. But to do that, we need to harness our collective creativity, to rise against conventional wisdom. Today, I want to present our strategy, a living document that will adapt as the market evolves. As the words left his lips, he caught glimpses of skepticism and hesitance, yet he pressed on. Instead of viewing our current challenges as a burden, let us perceive them as a blank slate. We have an opportunity to innovate what has long stagnated. His pulse quickened as he dove into the heart of the proposal. Each slide he shared illuminated the vision he had meticulously crafted with his allies. They were not just talking points, they contained the essence of transformation. The structure of a cross-functional task force would connect diverse talents and viewpoints, encouraging creativity in real-time collaboration. The executive's frowns slowly softened into contemplation. The energy shifted, skepticism mingling with interest. Hope began weaving its way through the conversations that brewed in quiet whispers. "Carlos," Marie interjected, her eyebrows raised in both inquiry and respect, "how can we ensure that this does not turn into another layer of bureaucracy?" His heart hammered against his ribs. "We will implement agile methodologies," he answered, his confidence solidifying. "Daily stand-ups to assess progress, an open feedback loop to promote agile adjustments. You'll have insights streaming directly from the ground up, ensuring accountability along the way." "Impressive," Marie nodded, though Carlos detected the hint of a challenge still present. "But what about profitability? How will you address that amidst this proposed creative freedom?" His voice remained firm. "Creating a culture of innovation doesn't mean sacrificing profitability. In fact, companies who empower their teams to express creativity often see higher levels of employee satisfaction, which translates to increased productivity and ultimately, better results. The constant adaptation will keep us relevant in a changing market." As he concluded, a serene stillness settled across the room. Right then, both conviction and vulnerability radiated from him. He realized he had performed not just for himself but as the voice of change, an embodiment of possibility interwoven with responsibility. "Let us launch this initiative," Carlos urged, channeling every ounce of energy he had cultivated over the past months. "Trust me to lead this task force. I am committed to facilitating this journey for our team, for our company. Change begins with us." Slowly, a murmur of agreement began to ripple through the room. Colleagues exchanged glances, nodding, their expressions evolving from wariness to recognition. A sliver of hope sparked between them. Jessica finally broke the silence. "I think we can all be on board with this," she said, glancing toward the executives who mirrored her evolving sentiment. "This offers a pathway for all of us to grow." One by one, heads began to nod, and the atmosphere transformed. The contrasting shades of uncertainty receded, replaced by a budding sense of collective purpose. As discussions ensued about next steps, Carlos felt a profound satisfaction, an unshakable confidence swelling within him. This was no longer just about reshaping his workplace. This was about shaking off the constraints that had bounded his spirit. The outcome was no longer uncertain. Carlos had led a dialogue that mattered, a testament to the journey he had undertaken. Standing amidst colleagues who believed in the potential to create change ignited a fiery pride within him. As he wrapped up the meeting, he felt a mixture of jubilation and grounding clarity. Every moment of doubt had birthed this newfound courage. Later that day, he walked out of the office and into the bustling city, the skyline framed against a sunset that mirrored his surge of victory. Each step he took resonated with purpose. Carlos was not merely the cleaner-turned-dancer, he was now an advocate for authenticity, reform, and creativity. He glanced back at the illuminated building, his battleground transformed into a platform for change. Never again would he retreat into shadows. He had firmly established his position, both as a leader and a creator. As the challenges ahead loomed, he felt invigorated rather than anxious. Above all, he had conquered the greatest conflict of all, the struggle between fear and renewal within himself. He was bold, he was ready, and he had learned that standing up for what he believed in was the bridge between aspiration and reality. Carlos had successfully achieved the most vital transformation, the acceptance of his power to instigate change and create a space where artistry and corporate responsibility coalesced into a brighter future. This was his victory, the beginning of a new chapter. And in that moment, he realized that each dance step carried him closer to the authenticity he had craved for so long. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it genuinely makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel. Only true fans of personal journeys understand the importance of taking these actions.